Let me share a bit about how this conference was conceived while you're here. For some of you who weren't here yesterday, the Global Learning Collaborative is bringing together people from civil society, practitioners, governance, people in the public health, and also from government. So yesterday we heard a lot about all of them who actually spoke on various sessions that brought out each of the areas that are responsible for making health systems stronger and more resilient. We also know that health systems as such have been through a shock, through multiple shocks in the last 20 years, but a major one that happened that silenced everything for a while in the last 2 years. So today we start our day with governance, and may I have the video, please? And life goes on is what I thought I would say when we begin what we started today. Life has changed, and so much that we really have started to value relationships, minimalize a lot of the things that we have never ever thought about before, and also realize that when we have health, we have it all. You can have all the money in the world, you can have all the, wherewithal to buy whatever you want. But if you can't travel, you can't stay, you are confined to your own home, help that used to come in so naturally didn't. So you just learned fending for yourself and how important health was to fend for yourself. So can I have the video on, please? Oh. So let me start by introducing some of the august people that are going to occupy our session today and the dais. And I will start with Manoj, who's already here. And he was introduced to us yesterday, but again, for those that were not here yesterday, Manoj Jhalani ji is the Director of Health Systems Development at the WHO Regional Office for Southeast Asia. In the past, he has been a member of the Indian Administrative Service. Between March 2012 and November 2019, he served in the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India, as the Joint Secretary Policy, and later as the Mission Director for National Health Mission, NHN. Holding the position of the Additional Secretary and Special Secretary to the Government of India between 1987 to 2012. He served at the sub-district and state level planning, designing, and implementing policies and programs in the social sector in the state of Madhya Pradesh in India. Several awards to his accomplishment credit, including the United Nations Integracy Task Force Award for his contribution towards addressing the challenge of known communicable diseases in India. I now have Dr. Harsh Mahajan, founder and chairman, Mahajan Imaging and Labs, chair, Health Services, FICCI, and the former president for Nat Health. Dr. Harsh Mahajan, an eminent radiologist and a pioneer in the field of MRI in India, having set up one of the first MRIs in 1991. He's the founder of Mahajan Imaging and Labs and has a chain of diagnostic centers in north of India. He's also the chairman of the Center for Advanced Research in Imaging, Neurosciences and Genomics at the Department of Nuclear Medicine and PET-CT at the Gangaram Hospital. He's a consultant to the International Atomic Energy Agency, Vienna, Austria, landed at 4 this morning and is here with us today. Advisor to the Union Public Service Commission, Preeti Sudan is right here, and is currently a member of the board of the National Accreditation for Board of Hospitals and the National and Mental Health Committee, National Human Rights Commission. He's an advisor on several government committees and national steering groups, including those for making an indigenous MRI, thermomammography, bra screening for breast cancer, indigenous transducers for ultrasound machines, amongst others. More than that, I think he has the warmth that you can't find and hospitality par excellence. You just have to go there and say, this is who I am and this is what I need, and it gets done without even blinking. Ms. Preeti Sudan is a retired Indian bureaucrat who serves as the Health Secretary for India for October 17 and 2020. But before I say that, she was the 3 chief influencers during the COVID policy and has been recognized for that. Amongst the 3 women that were there who actually made India go through COVID and come out of it the way it did. Ms. Sudan is of the 1983 IAS batch from Andhra Pradesh cadre. I'm very proud to be associated with her over the years that I have known her. Prior to her health secretary post, she was secretary of Department of Food and Public Distribution. Again, very important, a pipeline that actually makes most of human beings work. Key functionary in the planning and implementation of the Ayushman Bharat scheme. Since 2020, Ms. Sudan has been serving as a member of the Independent Panel for Pandemic Preparedness and Response, IPPR, an independent group of examining how the World Organization, WHO, and countries have handled COVID-19 pandemic. Ms. Sudan will not share what she does today, but you all know that she still holds very, very important positions and does influence and support how we are administered on an everyday basis. Thank you, ma'am. It's always a privilege to be with you. I have another illustrious serving officer who is Dr. Madan K. Gopal, humble as it can be, and comes across and takes care of us every time we do need something from him. Dr. Madan Gopal is a renowned public health professional with over 30 years of experience in enhancing health systems. Holds an MBBS and MD degree and successfully executed various health projects both in India and abroad. Currently serves as a senior consultant to Health and Niti Aayog, the premier policy institute for the Government of India. He plays a key role in numerous transformative health initiatives, including the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Gopal's achievements have earned him the national recognition, including the National Award for Excellence in the Implementation of RSBY and FOXY Award for his dedication to women health. I have 2 other illustrious women that will be there. Ma'am Sangeeta Singh, who is the CEO of the State Agency for Comprehensive Health and Integrated Services, the SACHIs, an ally and supports all those who need all the work that needs to get done in the state of Uttar Pradesh. Ms. Sangeeta Singh, again, from the Administrative Services and of the Uttar Pradesh cadre, heads the implementation of the Ayushman Bharat Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, known as the PMJY, in Uttar Pradesh as the CEO of the State Agency for Comprehensive Health and Integrated Services, the SACHIs. Government of Uttar Pradesh, under her leadership, the health insurance scheme was launched in the state in September 2018 and has seen high levels of adoption across the largest state in the country. She shoulders broad and huge responsibilities for assuring quality health services close to 80 million people in the state. Previously, Ms. Singh has served in the departments like Revenue, Labor, Food, Supplies, Renewable Energy, Health, Stamps and Registration, etc. The Secretary of NEDA, Renewable Energy Society in Uttar Pradesh, she oversaw the uptake of the solar and LED lights increase across the state. Her targeted approach to implementing helped the state in receiving several awards from the Government of India. She is indeed quite a legend in the work that she does. Privileged to have you here, ma'am. Thank you. We have somebody from civil societies, an organization that has seen so much transformation across, Ms. Rehana Riyawala. She's the Vice President of SEWA, the Self-Employed Women Association, that I have envied the work that they have done over the last 30 years that I know them, and they are much older than that. She's been the secretary since January 2012, and SEWA is a trade organization association based in Ahmedabad, India, that promotes the right of low-income, independently employed female workers. Ms. Riyawala joined SEWA in 2001 as its finance coordinator. Her growing efforts within the organization have made her the vice president and coordinator of SEWA in the House Management Consulting Unit, wherein she provides the technical support to various projects, evaluation studies, strategic plans, proposals, and reports, amongst others. Before joining SEWA, she worked for 10 years with a US-based company centered for international finance analysis and research, where she served as senior research manager. Ms. Riyawala, it is indeed a pleasure to have you. I also have the privilege of inviting Dr. Krishna Reddy Nallamalla, our Regional Director for Access Health International, to set the important context for governance today, and then hand it over to the moderator to take things forward. Thank you. Dr. Reddy.
Yeah, thanks, Suma. I think taking forward from yesterday's sequence of discussion, starting from the people as the center of the governance, the center of the health systems, then going towards the public health system, then further personal health care provider system, we come to the most important element of health systems, that is the governance. And most of the reports, as a part of the pandemic assessment, have identified leadership and the governance as an overwhelming implication in the outcomes, irrespective of what strength the health system is. I mean, most strongest health systems, ranked number 1, had the worst outcome because of the singular factor of the leadership and the governance. So since identified this as the singular factor, there is a lot of ambiguity in understanding this concept of leadership and the governance. All of us mistakenly equate the governance with government. But government is one actor in the governance systems. So that has to be first crystallized, that the government is one actor with specified roles and the responsibilities for the people. At the same time, the non-state actors, typically whether it is the private sector, and most importantly, the people, the civil society. Each of these actors, like people, have their rights, fundamental rights. They have also not only the rights, but a role to play in the governance, and also a responsibility to the other actors. So it is not just that it is only the rights of the people, but role and the responsibility to the people. And the private sector, again, equally has a responsibility, a defined responsibility, whatever is crystallized, because unless you crystallize what is the responsibility of the private sector in the governance and the health systems, you cannot hold them accountable. So these are, I think, the conceptual thoughts in terms of the triangle of the governance, where the private sector, the public sector, and the people sector. This is the triangle where there is a flow of information, where there has to be a relationships between the three actors, where there is a power balance between the three actors, and accountability of the three actors. So I think this was the construct to start discussing on this important conceptual element of the health systems, the governance. So that is one of the reasons why we have all the three actors here: the private sector, the civil society, and the government. Again, within the government, you have multi-level governance. That means the global governance, the national governance, the subnational governance. In fact, the three people represent these three levels of the governance. I mean, one of the critical factors that has been identified is this dysynchrony within the governments, both horizontally between the departments and vertically between the global, national, and the subnational levels. So these are the elements of discussion in terms of how to integrate this complex governance system involving multiple actors, defining their roles and defining accountability. So with this brief context setting, I hand over to Manoj Jhalani, sir, to take forward this discussion. It's the beginning of discussion around a theme, I think, which we'll be carrying forward in the coming months and the coming years as well, until we have very clear idea of what is governance. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Reddy. Am I audible? Okay, great. Thanks for setting the context. Governance, arguably, is the most complex and perhaps the most critical function to build health system resilience and enhance health system performance. On my way here, I was just thinking in terms of what do we really understand by governance. I'm not talking much on leadership, but because the governance is the focus here, so I was just on my way to this place thinking on governance and what comes to the mind. The governments, of course, I mean, that's the first thing that comes. But then policies, strategies, institutions, capacities, transparency and accountability, regulation, empowered communities and civil society, private sector participation, efficiency, implementation, coordination, both horizontally and vertically, decision making, how evidence is translated into practice, monitoring, communication, people-centeredness and responsiveness, trust, controlling corruption, appropriate roles and responsibilities of different stakeholders, health information systems. All of these are different sub-elements of governance. It's critical to how really tie them all together in a nice way, and that's what really adds to the complexity. In fact, unlike other health system blocks, so you have the WHO has those 6 health system building blocks, and unlike other building blocks which are relatively more technical, governance is both political as well as technical, and it has to be very appropriate to the context. And that's why, I mean, often we face the challenge in terms of assessing the governance and leadership function. It's relatively easier to measure some other functions, but difficult to see governance and leadership. You know, a lot of times you look in terms of inputs. Okay, which are the countries which have a certain policy? So you would like to say antimicrobial resistance. Now, pharmacists may not be authorized to sell medicines unless prescribed by a doctor, but the implementation may be quite very different. So when you try to score, you may like to give a good mark. Oh, they have a policy in certain ways, but then you find gaps in terms of implementation. So there are those kind of challenges in terms of assessing governance. Now, as per the WHO Health System Building Blocks approach, leadership and governance, and there is focus on stewardship, involves ensuring strategic policy frameworks exist and are combined with effective oversight, coalition building, regulation, attention to system design, and accountability. Now, we have a very distinguished panel today. Uma already introduced us. So without much ado, I'll straight away jump to the questions to the panelists. And my first question would be to my boss earlier, Madam Preeti Sudan, He spent 4 decades in administration and is now entrusted with one of the most single biggest responsibility in some sense of choosing the top civil servants and top, people who would be manning public services in the country. And Madam, this is another part of the governance, is that in our system, we rarely throw people out of the government jobs. Okay, these are considered very, very secure jobs. So in that sense, it becomes extremely critical that when we are picking the people, we pick up the right people, because then they're going to man various positions for 3 decades or 4 decades. And so it becomes extremely critical as a governance function in terms of recruiting the right set of people who will then providing governance and providing administration for long. So the question to you is, ma'am, governance of health systems involves both state and non-state actors. Participation of all actors is considered part of effective governance. In addition, health status is influenced more by non-health system determinants. What are the examples of participatory governance and whole of government approach in your long experience? And what are the challenges involved in participatory governance, and how can these be addressed? Over to you, ma'am. Comfortable to you?
Thank you, Manoj, and good morning to everybody and the distinguished panelists on this dais with me. It's a pleasure to see Manoj again, frankly, and be here. Actually, Manoj has very rightly set the framework. And if you went through the elements that he has actually described, you see, it's a web of very complex elements. But when we talk of health governance, can we make it simple in its working? Can we make it so efficient that it is automated? People, that means persons don't make a difference. So these are some of the things that I was thinking while coming here. I jotted down some points. So first is that I would like to say, what are the goals or aims of an appropriate health system governance? Let's be clear on that. Health system should be resilient, should ensure equity, ensure quality, ensure affordability, and above all, ensure access. And of course, the main actors, the government, private, for-profit, people, the famous triangle in health theories. And also that to achieve this goal, it has to be ensured that these actors, are accountable, transparent, just, responsive, and the whole functioning is participatory. What big words I've said, no? So, but they are true words. We know them all. But there's a rider, as I said right in the beginning also. When we talk of governance, we talk of institutions. You see, institutional arrangements, institutional processes, irrespective of who is at the helm of affairs. That's when the goals will be achieved. Now, one could give a lot of theories, but I don't want to. I want to share experiences, and that is what Manoj has mandated for me, and I'll stick to it. So let me give you some examples of what I experienced and, how I learned through the process of my 37 years of administrative experience. I want to share with you 2-3 projects, schemes, or whatever, or I would say my life-changing experiences. See, when I was in WCD, we did a tri-ministry scheme of Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. I had the privilege to design it and roll it. And what were the ministries involved? Health ministry, we were dealing with child sex ratio. Education, that means HRD ministry, very good, because we were very clear that if we have to handle child sex ratio, we need to have, you know, a sound, robust, accessible education system for girls. Then mindset change. You can't have mindset change. You can't keep saying that, well, there is a school now, you should send children to school. When you see people are thinking that a girl child is a burden. So how do you change mindsets? So as I said, 3 ministries, Women and Child, Health Ministry, and HRD. Now this was actually the first scheme, I would say, if I'm not wrong, Manoj, you can correct me, in government where the design of the scheme was also done by 3 ministries together. And I think that is a takeaway. Manoj has said, and I think Dr. Reddy also set the tone, that the social determinants of health, the other aspects of health, health ministry alone, or arrangements of health institutions alone cannot achieve and cannot make good governance health model. So therefore, the complexity is to be recognized and tackled. So in this case, in this particular initiative of the government, the 3 ministries sat together, put their heads together, and that's how we came up. There were very interesting, discussions. Somebody suggested we should have an icon, to a brand ambassador and all that. Then, because you see that will give us visibility and all that. No, we chose local champions. Why? Context is important. That's what Manoj also said. So you see, every village, we did have some grandmother, some grandfather, some father who actually showed the way, who had encouraged his girl child or somebody else girl child to come up. He was our hero. So, local champions were identified. And when there are local champions, there is also, you see, a lot of, you can relate to it. It's not something a Bollywood actor sitting in, Mumbai, who is my champion. No. Then, again in the context, we had a very small budget. I also want to say, we keep saying, health budget should be high, it should be this percentage of GDP and all. Yes, there should be provision. But I want to say, where are you spending your money? So it's not just money, but what are you doing with it? So we had a small budget, and today, when you see those, lorries and trucks going with Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao logo behind, they are not paid. It's not paid advertisement. It's just that people are doing it. So it just caught the imagination of people. And very, very significantly, the Prime Minister said, we will choose Panipat, as the venue to launch it. It will be the next battle of Panipat, because Haryana had an awful child sex ratio, very, very biased against the girl child. So also the solutions and what people did in their areas was again contextual. So there is something called Kuwa Puja. I don't know, I'm sure you know that. When a son is born, a Kuwa Puja is done in Rajasthan. So they started doing Kuwa Puja at the time of the birth of the girl child. Similarly, the Khap Panchayats, I'm sure you know about it, of Haryana, so powerful, my God. So these are the actually real panchayats. The elected panchayats are there, but Khap Panchayats are also there, caste-wise. They then, we worked with them, and they took up actually the cause of the girl child. And today, the results are there for all to see, very heartening. So why I said this, and how did we go about it? Actually, we did Gram Sabhas. So we decided a day when the entire country would have a Gram Sabha on Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, various aspects. So what are the aspects? You have these screening, the centers, X-ray centers, where they tell you the sex of the child. In health, we had the PCPNDT Act. We already had it. But how to enforce it well? Only if people will tell you that, well, it's being misused. And then it's always is that your neighbor knows that the daughter-in-law is pregnant, and then suddenly the child is aborted. So you see, it was this kind of a participatory approach. These were the issues that were discussed in Gram Sabhas. We had a list, and we requested the representatives of the people, the MPs, the MLAs, to attend these Gram Sabhas. We ourselves went. So that actually made the difference. So participatory governance, when we say, it has to begin with the village. It has to begin with the Gram. And Gram Sabha is a great way forward. So that's one example. Next example I'd like to give you of immunization. Well, you see, we got over polio, you know that. Then people were skeptical of how we will do COVID vaccination. Indians are not very educated. There are a lot of rumors going on, and you know, all that. But let me give you a little history behind it. Both regular and COVID vaccination is extremely well institutionalized. Again, now here I am talking about institutionalization of the arrangements. Who does what is known, irrespective of who is the health secretary. And Sangeeta will bear me out with that. I'm sure she'll also mention. So you see, we begin from the bottom, from the cutting edge, the most important functionary, the Ashas. You know, the Anganwadi workers, the Gram Panchayats, the mother committees, the self-help groups. So when there is a immunization camp in the village, everybody knows. Everybody works together. And some states, you know, there is every month there is a date. I think 9th, some states have 9th as the date when they do regular immunization. So all the young mothers come, all the children come, Anganwadi workers and Ashas work together. They attend the camp together. It's in a PHC, the consultation and the campaign could be in an Anganwadi where people come. So you see, a people's platform is provided, and you see, institutionally, everybody knows what to do. And if you go through, you must Google if you have the time, how cold chain for vaccines is maintained in India. It's a story in itself. You see, our Asha, she carries that little, you know, ice pack with ice box, or vaccine carrier, Madan is correcting me, with all the vaccines. And you know, we know batch-wise, vaccine-wise, through a system which is called EVIN, Electronic Vaccination Information System, that which dose is being given to whom. And this was done through in COVID also, as you know. You've seen the platform. I'm sure when you applied to go for a vaccination, you knew which one you want to take, where you want to take, and the government knows which dose was given to you, so that if there's an adverse effect or something, at least it can be taken care of. Here I want to share a story with you. My experience in 2018, October. Manoj was with me too. See, as part of routine surveillance, I mean, you'll be surprised because most people think, kaam hota hai kya? To kaam hota hai bhai. So along with WHO, you see, we do what is called, we collect samples from sewage, from, you know, railway tracks, stool samples, to just see whether any, you know, disease, evidence of disease is there. And we found, to our horror, that we had P2 virus, that polio virus, in one of the stool samples in Maharashtra railway track. As you know, the P2 virus, polio is eliminated. We did not even have a vaccine for it. The vaccine protocol is also changed. So it was such a difficult time for us, I can't tell you, but because of this electronic information system, we were able to, I mean, everybody sat together, WHO, the health ministry, ICMR, DBT, I mean, ICMR and DHR and all, put our heads together. We were able to zero in that there is this particular batch of vaccine which was actually causing this infection. So it was a vaccine induced. But thankfully it was, you see, very weak, because this sort of polio can cause paralysis. So the result would, I mean, it wouldn't result in, so you see the entire, and we knew that it has been given in UP, in Telangana, and I think one more state, I'm sorry, I don't remember that. Or maybe Maharashtra only, where the stool sample, but what railway track tha, so you don't know who was traveling and whose stool it was. Anyway, so the point here made here is that, you see, surveillance is very important. So an institutional arrangement for surveillance, institutional arrangement for knowing which vaccine where. So we were able to, there was a court case, this fellow, we arrested the manufacturer, we got back all the particular batches. So we were able to contain it. Very, very difficult time, but we did it. So why I'm saying is that, again, institutionally, we had the strength to actually pinpoint where the infection was and then, take the remedial action. So that was another. And this also, I want to share one more learning from this was coordinated action has to be there. So you see, so many agencies coordinated together, worked together seamlessly. Everybody knew what one has to do. Information sharing was real time, because we had to real time share information. So you need to also have systems of working together. Then I think Manoj mentioned it, or Dr. Reddy said, trust. Trust is very important, because when you're talking about participatory governance, when you're talking about complex governance, when you're talking about how many people are there, in this entire, I would say, very, very complex system, then unless you have trust, it's very difficult. I think in India, we are very fortunate. We have 10 million Ashas. We have 14 million Anganwadi workers. So how do they function? They are grassroots people. They are from the village that they work in. Over time, they have built trust. So when they take our message, it works. Incidentally, they played a very important part even during COVID. I mean, entire exercise of keeping people safe during COVID, then COVID vaccination, and I mean, hats off to them. My salute to them. I don't know what we would do without them. Then this also, the example of this surveillance also shows monitoring is important, because you can't say कि मैंने तो institution बना दिया, मैंने तो कर दिया, अब now I can sit back and let systems work. No, monitoring is very, very important. And let me share with you that when we had COVID, within I would say a month of, we had our first case on 30th of January, a student from Wuhan. And, by mid-February, our war room was ready. We were getting real-time uploading of cases, information. Sangeeta again would vouch for that. So sadly, Manoj had already left us for WHO. But he did come and say, कि मुझे काम बताओ, and he did a lot of work informally for us. So therefore, it's very, very important to get real-time information, and also especially so in emergencies, but especially so also in ordinary surveillance. So we had what is called integrated disease, IDSP, integrated disease surveillance portal. Program, and there was a portal also that was in our NCDC center. So on a real-time basis. That is now strengthened into integrated health information system. So that's I mean program. So So that's excellent. We've taken it forward. Then also my question that Manoj had asked me was that how is whole of government, response or whole of government initiative or system possible? And also I would like to add, Manoj, here, not only whole of government, but whole of society. Because again, it's, as Dr. Reddy said, governance is not just government, it's also other. So here also I'd like to share examples with you, because that's what you've asked me to. You see, whole of government is possible only if there is collaborative leadership. Now let me share a personal example with you. When we were handling COVID, the first wave, I would say, God gave me the chance to serve my country. We had 11 empowered groups that were given different kind of tasks. Kisi ko vaccine hai, then these medical, non-medical countermeasures. Then, Niti, for example, looked after feeding NGO. So they looked after that. So there were these 11 empowered groups. And mind you, they were headed by secretaries of two government. That means my own colleagues. And when I saw that list, believe me, it was very daunting, because I thought I have my 14 joint secretaries, 3 additional secretaries, and all. We are running here, there. We are trying to coordinate and bring everything together. Now I'll have to work with 11 people. But today, let me tell you that without them, we couldn't have come out of it, because it was impossible task to handle everything alone. So and no egos, only that you have to serve the nation. Self-interest, I didn't see any self-interest in that entire exercise. It was only common good kept above self-interest. And here I want to tell you also how the private sector collaboration worked. If you remember, we had lot of, in the newspapers, you must have read, and in the news also, we don't have PPEs. For example, the PPEs, the cloth for PPEs came from China. Now, we would stitch them and all that, but what to do about the cloth? So there is this lab called CITRA. This is the, South India Textile Research Association. It's a PPP model and run by the private textile manufacturing people and the textile ministry, largely by the private sector. So, every 2 days, even during lockdown, samples used to fly from Ludhiana manufacturers to CITRA in Bangalore to whether they have succeeded in, manufacturing that cloth. So, and Ludhiana textile industry did a great job. Later, now, of course, so many producers we have. So, it was the private sector. It was the laboratory run by both, and it was government. And mind you, within, I would say, 2 months or so, we were producing our own cloth, and today we are exporting PPEs. Next is, you remember that, the N95 mask, the respirator, we used to get from Europe. We used to manufacture the mask, but we didn't have the respirator. Today, we are exporting that also. Then ventilators. We used to import ventilators, very expensive, but we needed small ventilators when, oxygen beds for our COVID care centers, and we needed them in plenty. So DRDO and Bharat Electronics Limited, they collaborated, and we came up with ventilators. Today we are exporting that also. So what I'm trying to tell you is, you have to work across, stakeholders. You have to work with trust. You have to solve problems as they come. You can't postpone. You have to cut red tape there. And that is how whole of government approach was possible. I also want to share with you that leadership is very, very important. You mentioned it, Dr. Reddy, and I would like to give you an example. See, you remember 22nd March when we had that Janta curfew, the voluntary curfew? When the Prime Minister's credible voice told the entire nation that we will observe Janta curfew, and we will, at a particular time, I think was it 5 p.m. We will, हम लोग थाली बजाएंगे and clap करेंगे for our health workers. Two things I want to tell you about this. India began its journey against COVID with gratitude. You see, we were showing our gratitude to our health workers, to our frontline workers who were selflessly there while most of the people were in their own houses, number one. Number two, we did something which was contextual. In fact, I got, I won't name the agencies, but I did get calls from abroad, ye kya kar rahe ho tum, kya tamasha hai, all that. But this, whatever you may call it tamasha or you may call it whatever, you see, this one action or this one day actually told the entire nation that there is this, as Honorable PM called Mahamari, or there is this big unknown, disease that has come upon us, which we have to together, you see, we have to work against it. So again, the key lesson from it is led from the top, credible leadership, trust in that leadership, then also contextually played out, and the whole nation together. So otherwise, you have seen even in US and all, am I talking too much? But I'll close it, okay. So what I can go on and on, I'm sorry Manoj. So what I'm trying to tell you is that, you see, to put all this together, again, leadership, acha, way forward bolti hu abhi main. Way forward mein I said strengthening institutions, examples and I can't give you, strengthening infrastructure, then strengthening HR, then facilitative light touch regulation, okay, for the private sector, People's Connect, then for private sector, for profit, can you have self-regulation, please? Can you post your outcomes on your web page? Mumbai Clinical, do it. Tackling social determinants of health. Our health and wellness centers is one example. Fit India, Eat Right, preventive, promotive health. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It's echoed a lot of sentiments that people had. Thank you for sharing such very rich and diverse experience. You highlighted the importance of creating robust institutions and processes so that they become relatively independent of persons womaning or manning them. You highlighted the importance of collaborative governance and coordinated action, importance of partnership, engaging with the communities, trust, effective communication, political visibility, monitoring, context-specific solutions. I'll leave one question for you. I mean, maybe later if we have time. That whole of our government worked for health. I mean, in a crisis of this magnitude. And a lot of people say that not people didn't come for health, people came because economies were crashing. Security was a threat. So I was just wondering whether, recognizing the interconnectedness of all sectors, we realize that determinants of health, at least more than 50% of the health outcomes depend on actions outside of the health sector boundary. And so can we have this interconnectedness, I mean, more institutionalized in a peacetime work? I mean, so where whole of government approach that we are talking of, which works well during a crisis, can this whole of government, where health is both a beneficiary for actions in other sectors or health in all policies, and also health contributes to advancement of SDGs in other sectors, can this become more of an institutionalized approach during peacetime? So that's a thought we would have. Now I'll move on to Dr. Harsh Mahajan. He represents the good private sector. I am putting the word good private sector because you always, private sector in India is very, very diverse, you know. So you represent private sector in various capacities. Both public and private sectors have a shared purpose to be responsive to the health needs of the people. Public sector is accountable to shareholders, namely the people, while private for-profit sector is accountable to its shareholders. Each has its own pros and cons. While accepting the differences in accountabilities, can we have both sectors coordinate and collaborate? In your view, what are the barriers and how these could be overcome? Over to you, Harsh.
Said, the good, the bad, and the ugly, but that can happen, across members of societies, and similarly in the private sector. But this trust deficit, somehow, I've been interacting with government functionaries, both in my private capacity as friends for the last 32 years, as well as through various institutions. The trust deficit still remains and is very, very difficult to bridge. Even when we go as a FICCI or a Nat Health or a CII and interact with the government, our suggestions are taken. And this is in the context of PMJY, which we will hear Mrs. Sangeeta talk about. And also during the pandemic, ultimately what one feels, and this is, what is the feeling across the board in the private sector, that those interactions happen and they happen again. But ultimately the decision making, which will impact policy, which will impact implementation of healthcare on the ground, which will impact profitability of the private healthcare sector, which will impact ultimately the way that we are able to expand, the way we are able to get better technologies in. Those decisions, when it comes to the ground level, more or less get taken unilaterally. And those discussions that do take place, and this could be at the ministry level, this could be at the Niti Aayog level, they find very little resonance in the ultimate decision making, policy making, program implementation that may happen. Having said that, let me take you back to the year 1990, which is when I actually had come back from the US, did not find a job. I was trained for MRI, I'd done a fellowship there. The country at that time, in 1988, I came back, had only one MRI, which was in a DRDO lab here in Delhi. Just imagine for someone to bring in a new MRI in a country which has one MRI, and today we have thousands. The customs duty, it'll boggle your mind, was 204%. And the rate of interest, which government banks, and we did manage to get one from the ICICI, was 27%. Can any, business have that kind of ability to, service the loan? That is where, the people in the ministry, whether it be the health ministry, the finance ministry, they took cognizance. And that is really, I mean, we talk only of the economic revolution and the way things changed, but it impacted every aspect of life, including healthcare. It was brought down to something in the 20s. And that's where, the entire private healthcare, I think, began and came into its own. And we know that today we account for nearly 70% of healthcare in this country. So policy making can really impact what happens on the ground. And that's where, somehow the trust deficit that exists because the moment the word private comes into the equation, actually the feeling is that there is profit which is being made, irrespective of what may be the ground reality. And that I also speak with personal experience of running some public-private partnerships, where if quality is to be maintained, then it's very difficult to get viability. Now, how do we overcome this trust deficit? I think the only way that it can be overcome is if costs that go into providing a service, be it diagnostic, be it therapeutic, those costs are transparently looked at, discussed, where the public and the private sector sit together and, discuss it. And, it may surprise you to know that what, say, a prostate surgery or a brain surgery may cost to do in the All India Institute or in a LNJP hospital or a RML hospital, we don't know. The private sector has attempted to bring out costs. The FICCI, actually about 5 years ago, ran a study using a model which is from the Harvard Medical School, where more than 150 variables of cost were looked at, and we looked at 10 hospitals, different categories of hospitals, large corporate hospital, a medium level corporate hospital, hospitals in tier 2. We looked at costing in All India Institute and the Institute of Liver and Biliary Sciences here in Delhi. And what we found as regards the cost is that in the public as well as the private sector, the costs were nearly similar, give or take 5 or 10%. At times, they were higher in the government, provided you looked at the cost of land, you looked at the cost of people, things which are not really looked at when someone goes to All India Institute and says, I get my MRI done at 1,000 rupees. I don't know what the real cost is, price is, but say 1,000 rupees. Then, and in the private sector, it varies between 6 to 8,000. Somehow, the public appears to think that this is the difference in the pricing and in the cost itself. And this is the kind of profit that is being made. I think this And very rightly, Dr. Reddy has talked of the three pillars, which is the government, the private sector, and society at large. Society also needs to realize that what the costs are, and if that can be done transparently, Manoj, I think a large part of this trust deficit could be, overcome, and let the government do it. But do get some, neutral people onto the exercise, in the exercise, and then I'm sure we can overcome. Also, in the public-private sector partnerships, and we've done one in Uttarakhand, we've done one here with the government of India. This is something which the government hopes that the private sector will do, a better job of providing a service, and also actually provide access on the ground. But one thing that I've felt, and I feel that it's quite odd, in this whole process, the government also wants to make a profit. So how much will the government get out of the public-private partnership? That somehow is quite unusual. That a task which a government is supposed to be doing, after all, universal healthcare is something, the task which the government has set for itself. Healthcare, in any case, is one of the fundamental rights. Here you want public-private partnership, and you want to make profit out of it. I'm sure that money will be put to good use, but here what happens is that you are forcing the private sector to actually leave quality by the wayside. And also the fact that the L1, the lowest person who tenders, is the one who actually gets the tender. And again, quality comes at a price. And so that's where, again, I think there has to be a rethink at the policy and the governance level. Also, I think the good private sector, as Manoj used that word, would welcome monitoring, would welcome that you come and see what is it that we are actually, the kind of service that we are providing, so that you're able to make a difference between the not so good and the good. So really, in conclusion, I'll say the government and the private sector can work very well together. We have shown that during the pandemic. There have been learnings out of it. From a few hundred tests, RT-PCR tests that were possible when we started, we went up to 2.5 million a day. And there was still capacity to go higher. From, as Ms. Sudan also mentioned, no PPE kit, everything being imported. Today, we are a net exporter of PPE kits. Kits are lab kits for doing RT-PCR, for other tests. Today, we are exporting them. There are hundreds of manufacturers that came up. So there is that innate resilience. There is that innate brilliance. There are those innovators who exist amongst us who will rise to the task once this trust deficit is built. And I can assure you that with a few exceptions maybe, the private sector is not wanting to profiteer. We are wanting to profit, be viable, because ultimately that money is going to be put back into the system for us to upgrade, for us to grow, and ultimately the beneficiary is the country, our nation itself. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Harsh. And our message is, of course, that we can work together, and not only during crisis, but also hopefully during the peacetime. Broadly, governance requires that we utilize different players, different stakeholders in a manner that they are able to contribute where they have comparative advantage. And we saw that during COVID. And in record time, we developed vaccines, we developed diagnostics globally. I mean, that couldn't have happened without the good public-private sector collaboration. And good, I mean, you offered challenge of trust and offered some ideas in terms of how we could address the trust deficit. Now we move on to our next panelist. The question is to Ms. Rehana Riawala. She's from SEWA. She represents community and the civil society. She represents self-help group for women. While trying to address the health needs of members, how do you interact with the other two arms of the government triangle, namely the government and the private sector? Women continue to face discrimination across many societies. How do you represent the interest of women in overall health governance? Over to you, Ms. Rehana.
Thank you. Namaste and a very good morning. Firstly, I'd like to thank GLC for inviting SEWA in this conclave. And I here represent 2.5 million poor women workers from informal economy across 18 states of India. So to your question, Manojji, we have a very rich experience at the grassroots level, and our leaders also come from the grassroots level, and we believe in, say, primacy of local ownership and the knowledge. And so our strategy is that how do we work on the issues and needs of the members themselves. And we do understand what are the issues and needs of the members. And so if we take an example of, say, social security of the members, SEWA has played a major role in bringing in the Social Security Act for the unorganized sector. SEWA has also been part of the USC, and so we have a representative with the organized strength. We have the representation at each level, whether it be at the central level or, say, at the state level or at the district and the village level as well. We closely work with the local government as well. And to give you an example, say during the pandemic, we immediately after the pandemic, we were in touch with our members. Though the lockdown was there, we were not able to move. But then through the digital platforms, we organized the meetings, virtual meetings with our members and leaders, and understand what are the issues at the ground level. And with those, we used to say interact with the government as well. And we immediately after the lockdown and the pandemic, we sent a resolution to the government that these are the issues and needs of the members. And we are happy to share that many of the recommendations which SEWA has made, whether it be, the cash needs of the members, whether it be the distribution of food grains for the PDS system, whether it be the representation in the various health committees, whether if it is called by the Niti Aayog or the state level immunization committee, SEWA has represented these members and the recommendations were taken. And talking about few of the examples, I would share that during the pandemic also, many of the centers which were in the district and the villages, the SEWA centers in the district and villages were turned into the COVID care center. And with the private sector organizations also, we tied up with the various, like-minded organizations, and we were able to, bring in the resources oxygen concentration, and that were again been set up at the PHC or CHC level or private or government hospitals when the members were in need of. And even a team of doctors have facilitated the PHC doctors to educate on how to operate this oxygen concentration. So this is how we linked at all the level, whether it be at the grassroots level, local or national level. And it was not just only, say, with reference to health, but then we look into a very integrated and consolidated manner. And we saw to it that how do we, after the lockdown and when the things were little good, we also looked into it, how do we say rebuild the livelihoods of the members. And so what we did was, how do we bring in the low cost capital to the members so that they could rehabilitate and restore their livelihoods. During the lockdown also, we linked with various government functionaries, like in the villages, if we see that there was not only the health related issues, but then it was also the water was not available. And SEWA's team of water repairers and operators, who are the members themselves, would also take permissions for the government and repair the water resources in the villages so that the water is available for the members. We also linked, say, small and marginal farmers and the street vendors of SEWA with, say, the e-rickshaws from the government, and so that their livelihood could also be connected. And so we worked on, say, various issues wherein we could say restore the livelihoods and the health related issues as well. And we at SEWA, we have trained our SEWA health ambassadors, which worked hand in hand with the ASHAs and A&M workers as well. And like, because they have the trust in the community, like the SEWA health ambassadors, so we see to it how does the vaccine immunization happens, and they worked as a role model for the community. And because earlier there was a lot of resistance among, say, the community members not taking the vaccine, but then they worked as a role model, and then the vaccine uptake was also taken up. So we really connected the needs and issues of the grassroots members, and at the same time we see to it that with the government as well as the private sector organization as well. This is how we worked on, say, during the pandemic, as well as like our approach is such that how do we bring the leadership at the grassroots level, and we work towards sustainability and with a very integrated approach. Say, talking about the role of women members, like one of our twin goals is self-reliance. And when we say self-reliance, it's not just say self-reliance economically, but then we see to it that how does the decision-making power of the women members also increases. And so it's at the core of SEWA, and it's under the leadership of the woman that the family as a whole is getting benefit out of it. So I'll just stop over here.
Thanks, Rehana ji, and nice to hear, use of digital technologies to communicate with the communities, and happy to hear that several recommendations made by you, because of your strong community connect, understanding the needs of the communities and communicating them to the government, and these were accepted, also showed integrated approach and relationship of livelihoods, and work very closely with the public and private sector seamlessly. I hope this kind of collaboration can continue even in the peacetime of routine regular work. Now, question to Madan Gopal. You represent Niti Aayog, the apex think tank of India. How does Niti Aayog generate evidence to inform health policies? Since health is a state subject in India, do states have the capacity to generate relevant evidence to inform policy formulation and implementation? Does the government also consider evidence generated by non-governmental institutions? How can we strengthen evidence to policy movement? Over to you, Madan.
Thank you, sir. It's very interesting to interact with you again, because we have been interacting when we were doing that state health index. We used to interact with you quite often. And one of the interesting thing about the governance is we have mentioned about everything, the common good, which we are talking, and that's the missing link. If we are focusing on the common link, then you can generate evidence, you can work towards that. Common link is, common good is your people. You are doing things for the people. And that should be the priority, and we should be always focusing on that. The system and the details can follow around that this common good. And at the policy level, we usually keep the common good as a priority, and we weave around that. Niti Aayog, it was erstwhile Planning Commission, and we had that kind of legacy and the expertise capacities which was available. That was brought to us. So if you have seen, in the health sector also, we had that high-level expert group, which has given inputs for the comprehensive primary health care. And when we have moved from the health for all to the Millennium Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals, and we have changed our strategy from primary health care to the comprehensive primary health care. That document was available and that inputs were there. And in that way, we usually see that how we influence the policy. Because we felt that the strategy which we are having, the primary healthcare strategy with the 8 elements which are there, including the social determinants of health. When we want to expand the services with now the communicable disease more or less under control, the maternal health services, we are more or less institutionalized mechanism. Now the other threat of non-communicable disease, we have to generate some evidence and we have to change our strategy. And that's the way the strategy was influenced. The another example is when the PMJ program was rolled out. So we have identified the transaction software on a challenge mode, and one of the software was identified, it was rolled out as PMJ 1.0. Then there was a need that we are having so many portals. At that time, IHIP, Integrated Health Information Platform, work was also going on and WHO was supporting, and many states were in the process of boarding that software. At the same time, we felt that we should be having a common identifier which can be talking to all the portals, so that the intelligence which is generated make some meaningful sense. During the COVID times, we have come across with a lot of hypotheses saying that people having BMI, high BMI, they would be having more serious condition in COVID. The people who were having the BCG vaccination, we have all the information. We are having the immunization, we are having a immunization, every year we are having a cohort of around 3 crore for immunization, but there is a common identifier. Looking at that, what we did, we developed a stack, the National Health Stack, and the ministry has agreed to the stack and a committee was formed. And that committee usually gave a report which formed the basis of the National Digital Blueprint, and subsequently which was rolled out as the National Digital Mission, which is now trying to see that ID is given, a common identifier is given, the counties or that kind of place, and the blocks are the sub-county level institutions. In India, we are having blocks as a planning unit and the district about that thing. So we are having these 2 programs, and the common idea is that if you are able to move the indicators in these districts and blocks, we would be able to achieve the target of SDG which we have agreed. So these are few examples, sir, in which we are trying to generate evidence as well as use that evidence for better governance. Another important thing which we have found during our working with the aspiration district and the index is the continuity of the district level leaders, that is CMO and the mission directors, everything. So that kind of evidence was generated, and we could able to influence the states and the districts, saying that if the continuity of that person is there in that particular area, at least you can bring in results and changes which the program is intended to do. As a result, what is happening is you will be finding that at the district level and the below district level, at the state level, the tenure of the officer who is there, that is now more or less constant, unless there is some other compulsion. So we have been able to influence the policy by generating evidence, by creating things. One of the, to close my observations, one of the important thing which comes from the state indexes is not the economic or the per capita of the state which is influencing the outcomes of the health indicators. It's the governance which is having the important thing which can influence the indicator. That's why in our index we have given a lot of weightage on the governance indicators, and we see that how it has been institutionalized now, and now every state, the moment we generate this index, there's a discussion right at the chief minister's level, and the chief secretary usually talk that why we are not performing, we are also spending the same money as the other states. So we have been able to generate evidence, we have to able to create things so as to influence the governance through data-driven mechanisms. Thank you, sir, for this opportunity.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Madan. It's so nice to understand that Niti Aayog really is focusing on data-driven governance, and he brought out some very concrete examples of the state health index and status of state of health report where you measure performance of different states on common parameters and then trying to link NHM innovation funds or performance linked money payments go to the states based on their performance. So, and that's how you try to influence and improve the governance, and also about creating this based on health stack, creating these unique identifiers through National Digital Health Mission and the Aspirational Districts program, where you're trying to focus attention to districts that need maximum attention, and it does both the things. It addresses equity and also accelerates the progress, because those are the ones which will give you maximum progress. So good to see the big use of data by Niti Aayog. Now, last panelist, I'm sorry, we're really running out of time. Over to Sangeeta. You're CEO of SACHES to implement PMJY in the state, biggest state of the country, state of UP. For those from now outside of India, UP is 220 million population, so 250 million. So if they were an independent kind of a thing, they might be the 5th, 6th largest country on its own. So that's the size of the state of UP. And she's the CEO of the SACHES implementing PMJY. And how do you relate to other departments within the Ministry of Health and also other ministries? Similarly, how do you relate to National Health Authority at the national body? In addition, you also have to coordinate with private sector to make healthcare accessible to beneficiaries. How do you manage these complex relations? And are there institutional mechanisms to build these? And any suggestions there? Over to you, Sangeeta.
Thank you so much, sir. I'm honored to be on the same dais as Preeti, Sudan ma'am, and a lot of old friends. Just a quick observation before I start. I was often wondering, because I've been here in 4.5 years in this position as CEO for the organization that runs ABPMJ. And Dr. Madan Gopal just mentioned that Niti Aayog favors stability of tenure. So I didn't know Niti Aayog was behind my long tenure. Thank you for that. And thank you, sir, for giving me a quick peek at the question. So that helped me clarify my points a little. So I think the first part of the question that you've asked her is, how do I relate to the other departments? So that, of course, I would start with how we started. So I think interdepartmental coordination has been at the crux of the ABPMJ scheme. It had to be there, but it did not start like that. It started initially like all stratified bureaucracy departments start. It started as a solo independent health-driven program. And slowly along the way, people and departments started coming in and pitching in together. And that was a need-based thing, because we required other departments to participate in the operationalization and the day-to-day working of the scheme. We required other departments to come in, because initially when we started, the data started off with the Socioeconomic Caste Census 2011 data. That was a basically health-driven criteria of inclusion and exclusion criteria that was adopted. And initially we had 1.118 crore families incorporated within the scheme. As we went along, when it was realized that in such a large state as UP, many of the other society cadres, other society parts had been left out of the scheme. So then another cohort of the PMJ, so to say, was incorporated, which we started calling as the Mukhyamantri Ayushman scheme. And within that Chief Minister's scheme, several new wings were incorporated. And that included there was an initial survey again done by the Ministry of Rural Development in Uttar Pradesh, and that added another 8 lakh families. Then slowly the Board of Construction Workers, they came along, and so on, that added another 11.65 lakh families. Then slowly new pressure groups and new departments, they start coming in and saying that, okay, when the scheme slowly started developing and when the people saw the viability and the usefulness of the scheme, then several people wanted to pitch in, and they wanted to sort of come on board the train. And so we get requirements from several departments, like the information department. They have sent us a data, and that integration is still in process of the press people getting into the scheme. Then the e-Shram portal threw in another some few thousand families to be incorporated later in the scheme. That process is still on. So slowly that kind of operationalization, so that is one form of integration with other departments that we've seen just flowering off. And to begin, I would say that for any scheme to run and to be stable in future, the planting of the right seed at the right time is important. And I think the policy makers here and some friends here, like Kiran I'm seeing there, they were the stalwarts who kind of put in the right kind of seed in the scheme. And therefore, the kind of branching and flowering that we are seeing now. So the right ingredients have to be put in first. The policy has to be there, of course. But thankfully for us, PMJ was never straight-jacketed that this will be your go-to thing and you cannot go any further. Thankfully, there was a lot of leeway. And because there were so many wide angles to the entire scheme, the different states of India, they were at different paradigms of the entire journey. So some were totally greenfield states like us, who did not have any experience in any of such kind of universal health coverage schemes. We had RSBY, but unfortunately in UP before ABPMJ, 3 years before it started from 2018, 3 years before the RSB was just dumped. It was not working at all. So that kind of thing was there. Then there were some states like Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Karnataka. They were having such robust schemes like Arogya Shri, SAST, for example. And so who had a robust data, they had the wherewithal, the knowledge how to go about it. And so we were in different states of the paradigm, so to say. So to integrate all that together, to bring them together, and then to have policy had to be built in where the enough leeway had to be given to the specific states to do their own thing. And that has possibly been done. And NHA has given us that kind of wherewithal and leeway. And so whereas they give us the initial directions are there, which mostly we bank upon, we turn around to them to ask them for their validation also. But then in general, states are free to do their own thing. So in today's ABPMJ world, you will see some states have, initially they had their own systems on which they were operating. They were not even following. Some states like Tamil Nadu, they have gone above and raised the ceiling of 5 lakh to even above 5 lakh to cancer patients. So every state has taken on their own thing and gone forward with their own kind of requirement. UP is also following example. We are trying to correspond with different states because we see that in the overall working of the states, we had to take help of several other departments. For example, when we went around to making of cards, which is a very critical activity in the whole environment of ABPMJ. So in the card making process, the initial agency, the CSC, the Common Service Centers, they were not proving to be enough. So we had to pitch in more people on board. Then there was a development from NHA for a particular mobile application in which ASHA workers pitched in. So they went around with the task of making the cards. Then that kind of thing fell back on us because ASHA workers were not so competent with the software scenario and they were not able to handle the software and application so well. Then another kind of set of the society and department pitched in, which is the Panchayat Sahayaks. So Panchayat Sahayaks are basically IT savvy guys who are within the Panchayat, and there is a concept of mini Sachivalaya in each Panchayat, and then they took on this task of making the cards and they proved very useful for UP. So they were technically savvy, they were in the village and they helped us a lot in doing that. So slowly different kinds of people they pitched in and they kind of kept helping us. In the ABPMJ, in the Ayushman Bharat environment, not ABPMJ exactly, several new streams have also started coming in. For example, one was already there, which was the second pillar, the health and wellness centers that ma'am just spoke about. Then recently we have developments like ABDM, the Ayushman Bharat Digital Health Mission, and PM Abhim, which is the health infrastructure mission. So slowly recognition is there that it is just not the health insurance sector which needs to be built, but pitching in of manpower, of infrastructure, of initial diagnosis, of primary sector diagnosis also has to be done. So that kind of has brought forth a synergy of so many other departments, and that has started leading to a very robust development. The last part of the question, sir, I think was about how we are interacting with the private sector. So going forward, I think I would initially start by answering the question that you just posed to us, that is it important and is it viable for public and private sectors to work together even during peace times? I say yes, but I have a rider. We have worked well during crisis times because we were all drowning. And we realized that crisis has made us realize that we need each other and we can work with each other if we want to. So much so that ma'am just related how the vaccines were brought in. I could remember one incident from UP where a state chopper had to be sent to another state to bring in some vaccines, I think, at one point of time. And one team went there and the vaccines came down. I was heading the Medical Supplies Corporation. I was MD there for some part of time. And I have seen how the rate fell. The testing kits were costing some 1,000 rupees. And when more players came into the field and there was more competition, it came down to as low as, I think, 40 rupees or something. So that kind of difference we have seen there itself. So that synergy has to be brought about. But I said there is a rider because we should not see, as Dr. Harsh has also said, we should not see private sector as basically striving for their, that they have to do they have a corporate social responsibility, so they have to work for the public good. I say, okay, they have to work for the public good, but then they also have to run a business. So you have to see that part of the side of the coin also, and to take that into account. I'll give an example. During COVID times, our private hospitals were taking in patients, and the medical colleges, they were complaining because initially in the public hospitals, of course, the treatments were being done free of cost. But when the person obviously went to the private hospitals, they also had to do it initially free of cost. Now, slowly there was a clamor. There was a resistance. They started saying that cost is being put in. I mean, how can you expect us to treat patients free of cost? We have to charge from them. But since we are a welfare state, we cannot allow that hospital to charge the patient exorbitantly and to whatever rates. So some policy was built in, and it was decided. And since we were in picture, it was decided that, okay, my organization that runs Ayushman, we were there in play. And so they said that, okay, whoever patient, whether he's Ayushman or not, or if a COVID patient turns up in a private medical college, the private medical college will raise a bill on Ayushman rates, and then that will be reimbursed by Sachis, that is my organization. So that kind of initial thing built in, and we paid crores of rupees to these private medical colleges. They were partly happy, but because they got some money, maybe not totally happy, but yes, of course, they had to treat free of cost. So they were partly happy, and then the largest public good was served. When we have around a network of around 3,400 hospitals that are impaneled in UP for Ayushman Bharat Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana. And when I go to different workshops, we were just in Ghaziabad to loop in more and ask more hospitals to come within our fold. I set in some value propositions from them. I put it up like a business pitch. I tell them my value proposition number 1 is this. You will be given the benefit of green channel. My value proposition number 2 is that we have different tiers of payment. So if you are in tier 2 city, you will be paid more. We have an incentive structure in Ayushman Bharat, where if you are an NABH accredited hospital, you will be paid more for the base rate. If you're an NQAS accredited hospital, you would be paid more. If you're a teaching hospital, you would be paid more. If you're in a hospital in an aspirational district, you would be paid more. So those criteria, that kind of policy has been built in within the structure. That we are seeing the exponential growth of Ayushman that we've seen in the 4.5 years now. And now that I can proudly say that we've done around 19 lakh plus treatments in Uttar Pradesh till date. Spent around 2,300 crore rupees on that infrastructure alone. Of course, we can't compete with states like Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. Of course, they are much ahead in the game for us. But for a state like Uttar Pradesh to do all that, it was a major and to even set forth those systems and not break down in the entire process, because some days are just mind-boggling, because at one point of time you have to counter the fraud that is happening. At one point of time you have to coordinate with the hospitals. You also have to keep pace with the claim position, and to payouts have to happen quickly so that the hospitals come forth. So that kind of synergy, I think, total encompassing view of the entire scenario has to be there for any and everyone to work together, and it comes forth when all parties are on the same page. So the public part does not feel, that they are one up in the game. They are the big brother, so to say. We are partners in the game, and we have to come along. So when HWCs can help us in the initial diagnosis, there has to be a system. We are doing that also for our forward and backward linkages to the health and wellness center. So if a person is initially diagnosed as something in the health and wellness center, and if he needs treatment in an Ayushman scenario, you can handhold the patient through the process, then bring him back there, and then keep monitoring whether his cancer is okay, his heart is okay, his BP is normal or not. So we have the infrastructure. I think that kind of scenario is slowly being built in, and it can be a very robust system in the near future. I'm very hopeful about what we are going to see now, because infrastructure is coming up, manpower is being taken care of, health and wellness centers have come up, and Ayushman also is not a straight jacketed thing, the PMJ scenario, because there has been constant development in how much we pay. So the health and benefit packages have been increasing over the years. There is a coordination with the private sector hospitals as to what should be the standard treatment guidelines, what should be the package rates, how we should go about it. So it keeps flowering slowly, and then slowly being built in. There are some downfalls sometimes, but then we manage to pick ourselves as dust and then just go ahead. So that's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Sangeeta. We, although Madam said we need to create institutions so that they become independent of persons manning or womaning them, we see the impact that it can have when you have a stable tenure. And Sangeeta has been really great at leading such as and overcoming the challenge of implementing ABPMJY in a state which didn't have a scheme before, and also dealing with COVID through collaboration with all of government sectors, plus also with the private sector. I'm sorry, I've been a bad moderator. I mean, we really run out of time. I think broadly, I mean, there will be thought of we'll hear some more eminent people in amongst our audience, but really we have run out of time. And also we would have appreciated Q&A from the audience, but we really, I'm sorry, we're not in a position to do that. So let me just, if with permission from Dr. Reddy and Uma, we'll just conclude. And I would just say that leadership and governance, which incorporate the stewardship function of the government, and we need to create a framework where all stakeholders, all players are able to become partners and able to contribute to the common public good, as Madan said, but based on the comparative strengths of different stakeholders. And one area where I think private sector can do great and have been doing great is in the area of innovations. For the health sector, we need coalition, collaboration, need interconnected governance horizontally and vertically. And Sangeeta used the word putting the right seats at the right time. I think COVID-19 has created an opportunity. It has been a disaster in many ways, but it has also created an opportunity for the right governance, for creating the right governance framework which can allow for interconnected governance even during the peacetime. Thank you everyone for joining in, and thank you all the eminent panelists for providing such rich insights and very rich experience. Thank you everyone.
Thank you, Manojji, and all the august panel right here. I think it's a day-long session and we could go on this forever. We are flowering slowly to take from Sangeeta ma'am, and a train that gathers momentum from all of you is what we would like to be a part of. May I have, Stuti, can you bring up the recognition for us to, Manojji, would you please recognize the fellow panelists? Yeah. Please come. Dr. Reddy, you'll come up for Manoj. एक और दे दो. Manoj ji, for 1 second. I'm going to take 1 more minute and get us to play the video of bringing back those memories as why we declared today as a global pandemic. So can I have that video, please? And why the Global Learning Collaborative came up. We are here to make sure that all of us are safe and every nation is safe. We break for tea.